Good morning, everybody. Thanks if you're getting up early watching this or watching on the recording. Today I have Jonathan Feldstein with me from Israel. He lives in Efrat. He's a journalist. Tell us what your main website is and where people can connect with you.
Sure. Thank you, John. First of all, it's good to be with you. I'm the president of the Genesis123 Foundation, which is at genesis123.co. And our main mission is to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel. And we always say in ways that are new, unique, and meaningful. And especially the last 3 months since the war, we're trying to do high impact with the greatest integrity in terms of all of our projects, whether it's our Israel Emergency Campaign, hostage release petition, my podcast, Inspiration from Zion, and a whole bunch of other projects that really have that common denominator, which is how you and I met in terms of building bridges between Jews and Christians. And that's why I, as an Orthodox Jew, get invited to the Christian Media Summit here in Israel.
Yeah. Well, it was great to meet you a year ago when I was there. I'd love to get back there and had some friends over there over the weekend and just trying to connect with people and deliver some equipment and that type of thing to some of the IDF soldiers that they've been able to raise money for. So
Great.
Just sort of relate for us. So you're living in a country at war, and it's a small country, and the enemies of Israel are very close. And just kind of give us just a couple minutes, a few minutes, however long you want to take, about what it's like living there right now.
Yeah, the operative words that you just use are right now, because I'll tell you that 3 months ago, October 9th, 10th, certainly for the first 2 weeks or more after the war broke out and before necessarily even Israel's ground troops went in, I felt like we were living in Lamentations. That you would go, I live just south of Jerusalem. You would go into Jerusalem and the streets are desolate. There was barely anyone on the roads, not just in Jerusalem, but really all over the country. You could make it from anywhere to anywhere in about 25 to 30% less time because nobody was out. Part of it was there were so many rockets that you just stayed close to home where people belonged. Now things are unusually, and I'll even say inappropriately, but thankfully somewhat more stable. You can go into Jerusalem. You and I could meet today, have lunch, spend the other night. My birthday was a few weeks ago. My wife took me and a bunch of friends out for my birthday. Very honestly, I wasn't in a very celebratory mood, but it shocked me how normal things are. The restaurant was packed. People were out. It was very social. And that's nice. That's nice. And we have young men and women dying from in the IDF to keep us safe, to enable us to do that. But to me, it's very inappropriate on one hand. And while the pace of life is back to normal, just beneath the surface, it's very far from normal. In my case, we were just talking about it before going live. I have a son who's currently serving in the army in Gaza. He's married exactly 6 months last week. So he spent half of his marriage in the army as a reservist. My son-in-law is married to my daughter. They have 3 kids, 5 and under. And it's been terrible. He's been serving also more than not since the beginning of the war. The stress for him not being home, for my daughter essentially being a single parent, even though my wife goes over there and helps out with the kids, I do when I can. And for my grandchildren, they feel it. Not my youngest, because he doesn't know better. He's 1. But the 3-year-old, the 5-year-old, for sure they feel it. For sure they know it. Their behaviors are displaying that, and you can multiply that times tens, perhaps hundreds of thousands. And then perhaps the last thing just to note, as abnormal as things are on a normal basis here now, is the economy has been hit very hard. Prices have gone up. Tourism is all but stopped, although now lots of people are coming for what are known as solidarity trips. Still, most major international airlines are not flying because they don't have insurance flying into a war zone, even though, like I just said, you can be in Tel Aviv, you can be in Jerusalem, you can be in any major city, and without following your phone, you wouldn't know that there was a war going on. But with so many people in the army, about 500,000, I think right now, you got about 15% of our workforce not working. You've got universities that have just now started their fall semester on December 31st with anywhere from a quarter to half of the students who are in reserves, because remember, students begin military here only after they do mandatory service. So
Yeah.
you could come here and things would look normal, but they're really not.
So, are you, I mean, well, let's just discuss some of the different situations, because
Sure.
from here, sort of as an American sitting here and watching this and being, I don't want to say obsessed with this, but I can't get any, I can't remove myself from what's going on. So maybe the first question, I know some people on our chat are asking, is there places that they can go to donate to help out IDF soldiers? Well, I'll put a couple extra links in the show notes after we're finished, but organizations that you might say we could contribute to help out, because I know that you just don't dump 300,000 reservists into the IDF and everybody's fully equipped and that sort of thing. So where can people go to help?
So we did something on behalf of the Genesis123 Foundation and our Israel emergency campaign the day before Christmas that will stand with me probably the rest of my life as being one of the most significant things. You can't see, only you can. You see on the back of my chair, there's a green soft shell army jacket. So just like you said, there are hundreds of thousands of people. The war started and reservists were called up October 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. That week, and hundreds of thousands. It was warm then still. It was very pleasant out. Now we're full in the middle of winter, and soldiers didn't have, nor were army supplies prepared for an all-out war going on that was taking us into January. Except for 1948, we've never had a war in the heart of the winter. So we, through the Genesis123 Foundation, and I invite everyone to come and participate. We just made it public yesterday, and I know you didn't even know about this, John. We're asking for donations for these jackets. I noticed just as I was logging in to speak with you, I hope it's a good answer. The guy who I'm ordering another 3 or 4 or 500 jackets from called me and sent me a text a few minutes ago. So we're planning on going right back up to the northern border. There are other things that we're doing. Obviously, I recommend what we're doing because, as I said before, without intending to be a shameless plug, I'm doing high impact with the greatest integrity. I've been a nonprofit for 35 years or more than that maybe, and I'm very suspect of a lot of even well-intentioned people who can't deliver. And when we went up to the northern border, and people can go to our YouTube channel and see the videos that demonstrate this, the actual physical material impact that we're making, and the appreciation from the soldiers. I could go on. There are many other examples, and there are others who are doing it. I'm just not really tapped in to tell you publicly that I can vouch for anyone else. I'm not saying I can't. I just won't recommend because I can't vouch for it.
I have a couple I can vouch for, so we'll put those so everybody has an option. So, what's your YouTube channel?
YouTube channel Genesis123 Foundation. Okay. And we've got a great 3.5-minute video showing exactly what we did on the day before Christmas.
Fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the war. You said you had a son down in Gaza, and there was some very bad news out of Gaza last night. 9 confirmed killed, and I think 8 injured in some attacks and different incidents across Gaza. What's your understanding of what's going on down there right now?
It's funny. Anthony Blinken just arrived, and the administration.
We're sorry about that.
Well,
please keep him. I guess we'll be selfish and say you could keep him. But,
there are many things that the administration has done that are noteworthy and deserve thanks. I'm not sure why the specific short-term pressure now, immediate pressure now, for our military campaign to be wound down somewhat significantly. There's not a good military strategy to that, and my only guess is that they have decided that it's still okay to kill more Jews, but we need to continue to go forward with the campaign. Look, it's stressful having a son who's in combat like this and not knowing day to day Today I felt guilty. I slept till 6:30 in the morning. Usually I'm up by 4 or 5 o'clock because I don't sleep anymore. And I felt guilty sleeping that late, partly because my son and my son-in-law and my daughter's boyfriend are not getting the luxury of that rest. But also what you just alluded to, it's 6 a.m. every day. All the news stations, radio, TV announce the names of the soldiers who were killed in the previous day and whose families have already been informed. This morning it was 4. This afternoon, 5 more were added. And it's terribly gripping. And I don't, you may have seen the news. There's a very famous singer, actor, Idana Mehdi, who actually several months ago I took my wife to one of his concerts because she'd always wanted to see him, and it was very surreal. He went into reserves. He's one of the stars of the TV series Fauda, which is kind of depicting cinematographically what we're living through right now. And he was injured seriously in Gaza yesterday. Here's a guy well into his 30s. It kind of underscores that this is a war that's affecting us all, even the famous singers and actors who are serving to regular people like me.
Right. What's the weather like in Gaza, and what's the weather like up north?
It's funny you say that. I've added the weather in Gaza as one of the alerts on my phone, so I know what circumstances my son is either living in or fighting in. Gaza is warmer. It's much further south than the northern border, but it's cold. From soldiers who I have spoken to who've gotten out for a couple of days, they need these jackets just as much or almost as much as the soldiers in the north. But I'll tell you, when we went, we haven't had snow yet. It's very unusual that we have snow in Israel anyway. But when we went up on the December 24th to give out these jackets, we were on the Golan Heights giving them to one base of infantry reservists. We went to another base along the Lebanese border. We were hearing artillery all the time. And I want to tell you, John, I grew up in New Jersey. I know cold. The wind rips through you. It was so cold. Even with this jacket on, I was shivering doing the videos that I was doing with them. They need it. And there was I have to tell you the story. I'm sure you've been there, Mount Bental, which is the mountain that's just overlooking the Syrian border. It's a fabulous sight. We had great weather for a nice view. As we were coming down from there, we took a 45-minute detour from giving the jackets out just to enjoy the view. There were 2 soldiers talking on their phone in English, perfect English. So we stopped to talk to them. Turns out one is the rabbi of a major, I don't want to say what kind of unit, but a major unit that's stationed up there. And the other was his older brother who pulled himself into reserves to be his younger brother's assistant. And not an hour earlier, they had just had a conversation with their commanding officer who said it's a priority for them that they get 300 more of these jackets. So that's what I'm hoping, that we've got a confirmation that the jackets have arrived, and we'll be hopefully going as early next week to bring them their jackets. It's cold up there.
Yeah. So what's the word on how long the operation is going to continue in Gaza? I've heard up like all through 2024.
Well, there's a lot of chatter here. It's a good question. It's an important question. There's a lot of chatter here that soldiers are being discharged or going to be discharged. We've heard that in terms of my son, and everyone's optimistic about that. But to me, it's just chatter, because we can plan, but Hezbollah isn't following our script. And and today, I'll tell you what, I don't know how many, I didn't count, but I have the Red Alert app on my phone. And today, more than once, it was like the phone blowing up with like a slot machine where you hit the jackpot, boom, 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 one after another. Rockets in dozens of communities, drone incursions in dozens of communities in the north. And all it takes is one trigger, one actual successful hit to completely change the game on the northern border. And therefore, any discussion of anyone going home is ridiculous. So I've taught myself, when he comes home, great, we'll celebrate. When they all come home, we'll celebrate. But we're in the middle of a war that needs to be carried out and won. And therefore, certainly there's going to be a long-term military presence in Gaza. The question is it gonna dwindle down and is it gonna become our Vietnam, or is it going to
Yeah.
be something that we can actually go and find a way? I refer to it as terrorist whack-a-mole. In whack-a-mole, you never quite win, but we need to win.
So, how's it affecting? I think one of the reasons why our government is sort of pushing to everything be calm and stop doing things is because we have an election this year. I think about half the world is going to have major elections this year. So I think that's how, it's a political thing. If we're at war or we're involved in a war, it doesn't look good for the people in charge. If you can find the people in charge, of course, our defense secretary went missing for about a week. It's like, and now we hear there was at least one other hospitalization that nobody knew about either. So you wonder who's in charge. But what's the political situation there like?
Political situation is that again, you're always good. That's a very important question, and it's something that I'm following very closely because we've had since in recent weeks a much more frequent discussion of upcoming elections, electoral polls that are being taken place, all kinds of banter from the head of the opposition, even including members of the Likud party, which is the major ruling party of Netanyahu in our current coalition, talking about the need for new elections and government addressing the failures that allowed October 7th to happen. The polls are all showing that the current Prime Minister Netanyahu, leading his Likud party, will probably be halved in terms of the number of seats, going from somewhere in the mid-30s to upper teens. And conversely, showing he's currently a minister, but really from the opposition, Benny Gantz, who's a former general, a chief of staff, and minister of defense, who came back into the government in order to be part of the military success. They're showing his party more than doubling, with every reason to believe that he will be elected or be able to form the next coalition. That's if elections are today. But again, we haven't had elections called. Yesterday, I was on the phone with somebody from a major U.S. media outlet asking for information and how can they get an interview with Benjamin Netanyahu with one of their journalists who's coming here sometime soon for something to be aired in the spring. And I said, you realize you might be able to get the interview, but he might not be prime minister in the spring, or might be lame duck prime minister.
Right.
The important part of that is elections are inevitable. I also suspect this year polls can change, so it's hard to know exactly what the outcome will be. But what I'm following is not just the polls, but the level of rhetoric, because the more the rhetoric is vocal, the closer we are to that point the elections will be taking place. It also means that we may be closer to the unraveling of the unity that we've experienced the last 3 months, where right and left, religious and secular, everyone really seems to be on the same page.
That seems to be I agree with you. I'm looking at it. It seems to be splitting apart a bit. There was the Supreme Court decision came out last week, which we can question the timing of it. And Israel's going to the International Court of Justice and very soon too on charges brought by South Africa about genocide.
Correct.
And Netanyahu appointed the judge who put in the reasonableness standard as the person who's going to be the judge for Israel. And I think there's a lot of people, it's just like everything in the world right now. You look at what's going on and you just start scratching your head and say, what is going on?
Correct.
And it seems like, to me, from a Christian standpoint, we're in a major spiritual battle that's manifesting itself in politics and everything. So the war in Gaza continues. It's going to continue for a while at least. The question is, what's the day after look like? I know everybody's talking about, Jerusalem posted a whole their magazine last week was all
Yep.
about the day after. What's the thinking there? Just among, in your community, which is a conservative religious community that you live in, what's the feeling?
Look, there's obviously a unilateral understanding that Hamas must be decimated and have no control in Gaza. Unfortunately, we're speaking about no control in Gaza, but Hamas has a very big footprint in Judea and Samaria, where I live, and so maybe they're not as well armed, and they don't have unilateral control as they did until October 7th. But Hamas, let's not be foolish. Hamas still has a significant presence. The head of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, is in a very lame way saying that we have to have a unity government come in, including Hamas and Fatah, the PLO, to rule Gaza in the future. Netanyahu is saying, over my dead body, will either of you come in and have any rule over Gaza? And there are conversations about various coalitions among Arab states that are quote unquote moderate, which presumably would include Egypt, maybe Jordan, the Emirates, possibly the Saudis. Remember, all this blew up as we were very close to potentially having a peace agreement with the Saudis, and that might be a reason why. There was a great article, and I don't remember where I read it, but a conversation that it should not be any kind of governance of governments, but of the tribes, of their clans, because Arab society is very, very tribal. And that would be the most effective way to actually I can't say reinstate, to instate some kind of order and rebuilding of Gaza, because no matter what happens, there's still some 2 million people who need place to live, who need water, who need electricity, who need food, basic stuff. Hopefully they will transform. And then the last piece I would add, I wrote an article about it right before Christmas, where my peace plan is that we have tens of thousands of Christians like you come in to be responsible for the physical restoration, the spiritual restoration, the education, food, everything that they need. We should have an army of Christian volunteers coming in, whether it's under Samaritan's Purse or another ministry with credibility. And I'm an Orthodox Jew, and I say, yeah, let's make them all Christian or help them become Christian. Because once they love the God of Israel and not Allah, who they worship, if they love the God of Israel, at least they'll stop hating the people of Israel.
Yeah, I think the tribal proposal, the clans, whatever, that comes a lot from the work of Dr. Mordecai Kadar, who I hope to interview in the near future. But
Good.
So I said we were going to go to the north next, but let's talk about Judea Samaria, what the world calls the West Bank. And what's the situation there? Because I see these relatively massive, what I would consider to be fairly massive operations in different places like Jenin, some of the refugee camps, Balata up in Nablus and everything. And then also some concerns. There was a report yesterday about concerns that what happened in Gaza could happen in Judea Samaria.
So those are very real concerns. I'm glad that we continue to operate in the cities, in the refugee camps, taking out infrastructure. It's showing our intelligence is still working somewhat, although there are rumors and reports of terrorists digging tunnels from the Arab communities in Judea and Samaria, either to Arab, Jewish communities like mine, or under what's called the Green Line, the pre-67 border, into Jewish communities on the other side that are not quote unquote West Bank. All of that's definitely possible. The difference, of course, is Gaza's terrain is soft and sandy. Here it's very mountainous and hard rock. Now, as far as a reason for concern that something could happen, you haven't been to my home yet. I hope that next time you're here, you'll come. But the window behind me is facing west. 40 miles away is Gaza. On the other side of my apartment, we're on the 7th floor, you can see out the window with no magnification at all the main minaret of the main Arab village that's right next to us, called Abdullah Ibrahim. Not only is it closer to my house than it is to any than there was any Arab residential community closer to Jewish communities that were overrun on October 7th. It's not only closer, but there's not even a fence. So I worry, what will happen if they amass 1,000 or 2,000 people? And what if our troops get there soon enough and kill half of them? They're still in my building in the underground parking lot with 100 different apartments and hundreds of residents in no time. And then just behind me, there's a community center and an elementary school. 10 Arabs with machine guns and grenades going in there in the wrong time of day will wreak carnage that will represent a quarter or half of what happened on October 7th. So there's a real threat. And we have, last thing I'll say, we were supposed to have national municipal elections on November 2nd. And I was supposed to fly that night to the States. All of that was canceled. The municipal elections are now put off till the end of next month, February 27th. One of the issues here in my town is the incumbent mayor wants to bring back the Palestinian Arab workers as soon as possible. And residents, people like myself, are terribly concerned because we don't know if they're coming here to earn a living, if they're spies for the terrorists who are on the other side over there, or if in fact they're terrorists who are going to come in with weapons or working in our house. Like we've had many, many Arab workers in our house go into the drawer, take out a butcher knife and do business. So no, there aren't a lot of people who want them back. And it's not only physical safety, but it's now become a domestic political issue as well.
So, for example, if we were there right now, so I've been up to Shiloh a couple times. If I came to Jerusalem, would I be able to get up there to Shiloh to visit?
Sure, absolutely, okay. Mike. Absolutely. I'm not in Shiloh. I'm in Efrat, south of Jerusalem.
Yeah, you're in Efrat, south.
But you can go to Shiloh without any problem. My daughter and my daughter-in-law, who was supposed to be there with my son, went to college 2 weeks ago in Ariel, which is just past Shiloh. There's no impediment to driving to these places. It's just more tense.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the north. So the concern from the people I've talked to, Amir Avivi, who's a friend, and others, is that whatever happened in Gaza, they were more concerned about that happening in the north. People coming across the border through tunnels, taking hostages, doing what happened on 10/7. What's the perspective that you have, based on your knowledge, as to is war in the north inevitable?
First
or
of
is
all,
it going to calm down?
Let me answer your question directly. If it's not inevitable today, tomorrow, next week, this month, it needs to be inevitable minus an act of God. Because what we know or believe we know, and I say that with a big asterisk next to it, because we believed we knew different things before October 7th regarding Hamas and Gaza. We know that Hezbollah supposedly has 150,000 not short-range rockets, but that Hamas had, but 150,000, many of which are long-range missiles with tremendous accuracy and a much bigger warhead. And I've made a case. You asked earlier about the day after. I haven't written it yet, but an article coming is called provisionally The Day Before the Day After. And the day before the day after is we need to take out all the military infrastructure of the Houthis. And I would hope that the Saudis and the Egyptians and whatever this coalition that's come together to try to keep shipping open, and doesn't really seem that they're able to do that, will come together for that. We must take it to the Hezbollah, because we can't wait around for them to decide today's our October 7th and start launching. If Hamas launched a few thousand rockets on October 7th, Hezbollah could launch tens of thousands in one day. And I don't know what the capacity of the Iron Dome or the mid-range anti-missile systems are, but we're looking for something that's going to be devastating anyway. My personal belief is that, war is inevitable, and it must be inevitable because we need to take them out on our terms, not wait for them.
Yeah. So, I mean, the numbers are, I hear 100, 200, 250,000 people in the south and the north that have
Correct.
evacuated. They're staying in hotels in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, a lot. And I heard an interview with, she heads up the Alma research group,
Okay.
Sarat Zahavi, I think is her name. And she was just saying, I live in the north. We can't live here with this threat. And the question is, how far does, everybody talks about, well, they need to withdraw north of the Litani River, but I don't even know if that's adequate when they have all of those rockets.
No, they first of all, any withdrawal, any that's the problem. If you remember, and I know you do, going back to 2006 when we had the what's called the Second Lebanon War, it ended with the conclusion of UN Resolution 1701
Right.
that said that they can't build up armed forces or infrastructure south of the Litani River or wherever it was. And not only did they not care and began doing that right away, but the UN doesn't care.
Well,
And so
1701 had no enforcement mechanism
it had
behind
no
it.
enforcement mechanism, and it came from a body that simply doesn't care, that sacrifices Jews and Israelis willingly. And so I don't understand how anyone can talk about pushing them back past the Litani River when their infrastructure is all the way up to the border and maybe under the border. So again, war is not nice. War is ugly. It's unpleasant. We will bear the brunt of that. There's absolutely no question that we will bear the brunt of it. But shouldn't we, if we have to do that anyway, if that's inevitable, you've got the analogy between pulling off a Band-Aid slowly that hurts with every single hair or just a quick rip. And the quick rip hurts. And we're still gonna, but I don't know how many planes we have. And I've never been in a military, so I have no basis to say this. But if we sent dozens of planes on multiple sorties over nonstop over 2, 3, 4 days and just blow up infrastructure that we know exists, yeah, rockets will get through. There will be casualties on this side as well, but we need to take it out and let the Lebanese come and try and take back their own country, which they deserve. But for lack of them doing that, they're also complicit in allowing Hezbollah to do what they've done.
In her interview with the IDSF a couple of weeks ago, Sarat said that every third home in southern Lebanon has a direct connection to Hezbollah in some fashion.
No doubt.
And the question is, how do you deal with that situation? To me, it seems to be an impossible something that almost is impossible to deal with unless you just render South Lebanon all the way to Beirut uninhabitable. And even then, I don't know that it's accomplished anything because you got the Bekaa Valley
Right.
and all that where
Right.
Hezbollah is very, very strong.
Right, and those are the right words. And even then, we don't know. And going back to the issue of the current administration and U.S. elections, one of the things that we have to continue to figure out, because Hezbollah, as strong as they are, and as much as the threat is very real, Hezbollah is still just a proxy puppet of the Iranians. And even if the Iranians don't have a nuclear weapon yet, they still have the ability to deliver significant weapons arsenal and much longer range and more powerful rockets that'll hit and devastate us. And the question then becomes, okay, if we go rogue, not really the right phrase, but if we go at Hezbollah in Lebanon on our own and don't have the backing of the U.S., which now has pulled away the Eisenhower, it's no longer in the Mediterranean. So I don't know if that's a threat to Israel or a reduction of threat to Hezbollah or what that means. But if we don't have the backing and the ability to continue to rearm, that impacts how we carry out all of our future operations.
Yeah, you almost have to develop your own manufacturing system. But I think that if my understanding is correct, the memorandum of understanding signed back in 2016 with the Obama administration that would allow Israel funding, which is not necessarily like we give you money and you just do whatever you want with. There's really severe restrictions on it.
Correct.
And part of it is you can't manufacture some of your own arms. And I think that shows that that just isn't going to work going forward. So
Right.
it's a very volatile situation. So let me ask you this. I promised to keep you this to about 30
Sure.
minutes, and we just passed that amount. And we can continue again when you have some time, because we could talk for hours and hours about this.
Indeed.
Because it's such a complex thing that so many people here in the U.S. that love Israel are concerned about. How would you like to see us Christians, beyond the contributing, maybe coming over there to help on a solidarity tour and helping out? Like, for example, down in Gaza, I hear that there were all these crops that didn't get harvested, and that's going to impact your food situation. Right?
It is impacting the food situation. It's impacting the prices. It's impacting the economy of farmers. It's not just there, because after the massacre on October 7th, some 30,000 foreign workers fled Israel. They were evacuated out of here, and they were a major source in terms of harvesting, in terms of planting, in terms of everything in the agricultural industry. Look, these are lovely first world problems to have, but the quality of fruit and vegetables has gotten lower. We're importing much more, I think, than ever before, because there are things that are rotting. There are not enough hands. So sure, come over, volunteer, join us to volunteer, contribute. But my first answer, honestly, is always has to be prayer. Prayer is God's currency. And people need to know. They need to know, and I'm always happy to engage anyone. They need to know, what are they praying for? Sure, we can toss around the phrases, the peace of Jerusalem, and be watchmen on the wall. But conversations like we're having, John, are super important, because you're helping others get a sense of what really is going on here and what to pray for. And I'm always happy to have these kinds of conversations and know the truth and stand up for the truth. And yes, we are in an electoral season, and that means everybody, no matter what district they live in, no matter what state they live in, they need to be holding any incumbent or aspiring candidate for public office, from mayor on up, or city town council and board of education on up, that support of Israel is a red line, and you don't support Israel, and we don't support you. It shouldn't be the only issue, but it certainly should be one of them. And Christians in America have a lot more influence. And if you go look at the last thing I'll say on this, if you go and look at the video on our YouTube with those soldiers speaking, and I tell them specifically that most of the money for our projects comes from Christians. What does that mean to you, John? They are overwhelmed. They don't understand it. Most Israeli Jews don't understand why people like you care, much less actively support and love us. But it's heartwarming. So I ask people to continue with that.
Okay, well, we'll keep that in mind. It's the growth of anti-Semitism here in the United States, even among people who we thought were allies, or are allies on many, many issues.
Yeah.
Even among major conservative media, where they just sort of look at, well, that's Israel's problem, and it's very troubling to us. It's my Twitter feed is full of the most vile, hateful things. Somebody who I respect, like Caroline Glick, she posts something, and then the response to what she posts is just the most vile, hateful stuff. It's just, it's unbelievable. Sure. It's very depressing.
Americans need to know that the third largest massacre of Americans since 9/11 took place by Hamas Islamic terrorists on October 7th. We're all in this together.
And there's still the hostages, and we didn't.
And there are still 6 living hostages that we believe, plus the bodies of a few others who are just Americans. 136 hostages, 6 of whom we believe are alive, and others who have been declared dead.
Unbelievable. Well, look, we'll keep everybody in our prayers. Thank you so much for your time. Genesis123.co, and we'll do this again as soon as possible.
Anytime, John. Thank you.
God bless. Thanks a lot, Jonathan.
Thank you. Bye.